without further ado, I would like to introduce our Head of School, Professor Amanda Gibney, who is here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Hello, everybody. You're all very welcome. And thank you, Katie, for the introduction. Just before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about civil engineering in UCD, and also then to tell you a little bit about our programs that we have, our master's programs. So we've recently celebrated over 100 years of the discipline of civil engineering in UCD. We have about 17 academic staff who are active researchers and researching in the area of, say, structural dynamics, earthquake engineering, geotechnics, wind flow, computational dynamics, structural health monitoring, looking at soft soils and transport policy and various things like that. So quite a lot of research, active research going on, of which you would be part of for a master's program for your project, which is a major part of the master's program. So in the school, we have about 100 undergraduate students on the Belfield campus. We also have 120 students in our Chang'an campus in China. We have 55 taught graduate students, and we have about 35 graduate research students as well. And our students come from all across the world, and we have about 25% students who are non-EU students. So quite a diverse range of students we have in our programs. So the programs that we have in terms of our master's offerings, we have a master's with 2-year masters, which are the Master of Engineering, and we have 1-year masters, which are Master of Engineering Science. So our ME, or Master of Engineering programs, would be Civil, Structural and Environmental Engineering, Master of Engineering in Structural Engineering with Architecture, and we have a Master of Engineering in Civil Engineering, which is one of our 2-year collaborative programs with Columbia University in New York. We also have an opportunity, not a program that we run from our school ourselves, but we have an opportunity for Master of Engineering in Civil Engineering with Business as well. The 1-year master programs that we have, Master of Engineering Science, we have in Structural Engineering, and we also have in Water, Waste and Environmental Engineering. So those would be the range of master's programs we have. If you want to ask any further questions, please do about those master's programs. But without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker for today. And I'm very pleased to welcome here today Dr. Dervilla Mitchell. Dervilla is a graduate from UCD, and she commenced her career in Dublin with Arups. She went to Boston and then subsequently returned to Arups in London, where she is a director now. Dervilla is an inspiring engineer, and I'm sure her talk today to you is going to be very inspiring. She's going to give you a glimpse of her highly successful career and very rewarding career. I'm sure she will let you know. Dervilla has many awards bestowed on her from the Institution of Structural Engineers and from Engineers Ireland and other awards as well. Dervilla will give you a more detailed description of her career, obviously, and is going to show you some of the projects that she has worked on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dervilla, and she's going to give us a talk about her career. Thank you, Dervilla.
Good morning, everybody. I speak to you from London, but I think of myself as being from Dublin and in Dublin at this moment when I speak to you. I'm going to now share my screen, which has a presentation, so you get to see some pictures. So I am Dervilla Mitchell, and I cannot believe that it is almost 40 years since I graduated from UCD, and I have this young person looking out from the mast of a ship. I absolutely could not have envisaged what my career would be like or where I would be today when I was leaving UCD. So I'm hoping that this talk gives you a little sense of what you might do, what you could do, and where you might end up. But saying that, everybody has their own individual journey. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career. So that's about the past. I'm going to give you some glimpses of the future, because I think being an engineer these days is a very exciting future for us, and probably a broader future than I ever imagined as a graduate. I hope you are considering a master's because you're on this call, and I want to allow time for any questions you may have. So although I graduated as a civil engineer and my passion was geotechnics, soft soils, Amanda mentioned, consolidation of peaty soils was my interest, the only job available was in structural engineering, and so that's what I did. But I don't think all the time about myself being a civil engineer. I think about my role being someone who helps turn ideas in people's heads into practical, real realities. And of these three pictures, one is Leadenhall Street in London. I was involved with, but you know, one might find oneself involved with buildings or bridges, or in this case, on the right-hand side, a sculpture at the London 2012 Olympics. So turning ideas into buildings is my job. And if I look at my career on a single sheet, I've gone from being, you know, a structural engineer to being a multidiscipline engineer. I started with a lot of design and calculations. I found myself managing teams of people, then leading projects, and eventually what I would call design team leader, that's the DTL, leading large multidiscipline design teams. I've been responsible for groups of people, and I've had a lot of work in aviation. And as Amanda said, I started in Dublin, had a couple of years in Boston, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and then returned to London. And I've spent quite a lot of time in London ever since. So I think it's about 30 years now in London. But my early work was very simple extensions. So although I started in UCD, my first work was in Trinity, and extensions to the Pavilion Building, extensions to the Science Building. So very simple things, but things as a young graduate I could get my hands around. And I was extremely proud when I was given my first package, which was the handrails and crush barriers at the East Stand at Lansdowne Road. Now long since demolished, but as a young engineer, I was proud to have that responsibility for people's safety at a new stadium. And then I spent a year on site at the UCD Library Extension. So those of you who are from UCD will recognize this building. And it was a very different time then. You know, here's a picture of young Dervilla on site, you know, no ear protectors, no health and safety equipment. So I think the industry has moved along quite a long way, and health and safety is now at the forefront of our minds all day and every day. But then I was married, and I had the opportunity to join my husband in Boston, where he was studying at Harvard for an MBA. And I joined a company called Weidlinger, and I had the chance to do lots and lots of projects. I left Ireland at a time of recession, and so I would advocate to you to think about the opportunities that a crisis or a problem brings, particularly now as we're locked down with COVID. So what did I learn from working with America? I learned, you know, to be much more independent. I've moved from a large organization, Arup, where I was very well supported, to a much smaller organization where you had to be independent. I learned how to move from metric back to feet and inches. So how do you relearn some things? And I also did the same hotel in 2 different cities. And what you discover is how much more you can become more efficient and you can improve what you do. So America was a hugely learning experience. But we returned to the UK, and I call this the shopping centre boom. So in the late 80s, 90s, all there were shopping centres and town centres. So what did I take there? I learned to be responsible for a larger team, and that's a bit scary at first, but because you're responsible for everybody else, and also you're not as efficient because you're suddenly looking after others. But I think you have to just take the opportunities as they arise, and I learned a lot about retail. I then moved on to what I call my South Coast years. So still I was based in London, but I was regularly traveling to these range of sort of projects. On the top left was a canteen and training centre for the travel company Saga. And that was in Folkestone, and they wanted to bring employment to Folkestone. The bottom left is a racecourse redevelopment at Goodwood, fantastic project, but both of those were for private clients, so understanding their needs and that their money had to go a long way. And then on the right was 2 public projects. The top is a police station and the bottom is a school. And I got huge enjoyment out of doing the school, a new secondary school in Hastings. Unfortunately, it was beset with difficult ground problems, but I learned that on the South Coast, the ground is full of holes and you can lose a lot of concrete into the ground. But they were all 4 really fun projects. And out of that, I learned that the importance of relationships, because on the left-hand side, on both of those occasions, I was working with the same architect, Michael Hopkins and Partners, getting to really know what they were trying to achieve. On the right, I was working with the East Sussex County Council. So there again, public money and public buildings, which led nicely to my first major project, which was Portcullis House in Westminster. I wasn't involved from the very earliest, but I joined it midway through the project. And here it was learning to deal with a highly complicated project in the public eye. So it was always to the press about how much was being spent, when would it be delivered, were there delays. So you learn to really just focus on getting the work done and getting it done well. And there is an article for those that are interested in the Institution of Structural Engineers magazine, which describes this building, which is a fascinating project. But I highlight there that up till now, so I'm probably 12, 15 years into my career, we were still working in paper with pens and pencils. And at this stage, we were offered to share a computer between 6 of us. And we were told that a thing called email existed. And if we wanted to use it, we could. But we didn't, because we didn't know what it was. So it took a few years to get on top of that. So technology was changing. And then this is probably one of the most significant steps in my career, was moving and spending 6 years based at Heathrow and taking the Terminal 5 project from early concept stages right the way through to delivery and completion of the structure. I did not stay on for the fit out stage. But it was 6 years of fantastic learning. And you have to acknowledge that sometimes during your career, you have to stick with a project for a period if you're going to really extract all the learning from it. And at that stage, it was the first time I really came across what we called at that time a single model environment, which is one single model of every single bit of the building, structure, services, baggage, everything. And an image from it is there on the right. And that today is called a common data environment, but it's taken a long time for it to be more adopted by the industry. And then when I finished at Terminal 5, you have to go and win more work. That's the stage of your career where you've got to win more work. So I was part of the team that won T2 in Dublin, and I spent the next couple of years traveling from London to Dublin every week to work on this project. So it's nice to have a project in my hometown. After that, another major project, I worked on the housing for the Olympics 2012, but in effect, it was the creation of a new city and housing in the east of London. And that was very demanding in terms of time and delivering something that was cost effective. So very different from the airport work, very commercially driven. And then I decided to accept another challenge. I'd done 2 airports, and here was one in the Middle East. It is absolutely vast. Those facades in the front of the building are something like 70 meters tall. So, and if you can look at the slide on the right, you may be able to see, if I highlight some tiny little red dots, they are people in the scale of the whole structure. So very large, very complex project, different cultural environment, different norms, different way of working. So again, I've probably worked on that for over 6 years. It's not yet finished, but it's been a massive learning experience and exciting to understand a different part of the world. But after that, I returned to my home base in West London and have worked on the expansion for Heathrow. It's now stopped, but it was very interesting to work collaboratively with a range of competing engineering and consulting organizations to work together to conceive and be ready to deliver a new master plan for a major airport. So very different work, front end, planning, organization, enabling, as opposed to delivering design. And I enjoyed focusing on different part of a stage of a project. So I wanted to just say that over my career, which you've made me today think about how long it is, you know, I've moved from a very drawing board, paper-based set of tools right the way through computers and programmable calculators to now us mostly storing most of our data in the cloud and working collaboratively in the cloud. And so that's been a big, big change. And I think that's one of the exciting things, that it's always evolving and changing. But probably more important for me is that the output has become much more exciting and more interesting. So when I started out on the left, top left, it was everything to do with reinforcement drawings, paper, black and white. We moved at the T5 stage into 3D models, lower left. Now on the top right, you see an animation of the design of a stadium, and you can incorporate the landscaping, the structure, the services, and the flow across the top is the model of the air temperature as it flows across the stadium, and how do they maintain a cooler temperature within the stadium for the players. And on the bottom right, is one of the most major projects in London is Crossrail, and here we can now model the existing services, the new station, and we can model the people moving through those facilities. So it really can be viewed by clients and people who are not engaged in the business much more easily, and we can explain our work much more easily. But we're going to move forward into a time where we're going to experience our work. I'm just pressing play here. So this is a little lab, what we call iLab in London, one of our London offices. And here, before the design has been completed, and while we're talking to the client about a new concert hall, we can bring the client into the office, and they can both hear the orchestra that's playing, and they can also see what it would be like to be anywhere in that auditorium. So they can sense and feel what it's going to be like, and they can tweak the design in advance because they're able to experience it. Now, I think this is not done on every project at the moment, but it will be done on most projects in the future. So I think that's great. And then I'm going to stop speaking for a minute and want to have you listen to one of my colleagues, because this is a view of what might happen in the future, how we use robotics and how we create material in a different way. So this is a bridge in Amsterdam.
So this project, the MX3D printed bridge, it's basically, it started with an artist who specialized in designing chairs using digital fabrication techniques. One day he put a welding device on a robot arm, and he started printing steel wires in midair, and then decided, hey, that could be a bench. And when the bench was done and it looked beautiful, and he kind of figured out his technique, he said, well, this could be something else as well. And then he decided, let's make a poster project out of it, and let's print a bridge. Now, if you make a chair, you get this big guy sit on it, you kick it a couple of times, and if the chair doesn't fail, it works. With a bridge, it's a bit different. You need some engineering, and that's when they called us. And we came in with our traditional engineering constraints. It has to be safe. It's going to be put in the red light district of Amsterdam, so women in heels are going to be walking on it. So it has to be dense, and all other kinds of constraints that we brought along. And slowly we came together to this project. It's a new construction technique, and it's also a very difficult product because we don't know the tolerances. We don't know the material specifications. We don't know the exact geometry of the end product. So it's very difficult to analyze. So what we did was we made a conceptual design, and we said, well, if you do it approximately like this, it will work. And then during the printing process, we keep on testing and monitoring the product. And when the product is done, we'll test the whole thing and then keep on monitoring it during the lifespan of the bridge to ensure ourselves and the world that this bridge, this element is safe. And for us, that's a new way of working, definitely in Amsterdam. And what this project has taught me is that if we look at new construction methodologies or new materials more as a product, instead of a product that you can test the end result, then we can speed up innovation in our field of play. And that's what I really learned on this project. And that's probably for us the most interesting bit as well. Because if we can bring new materials or new construction techniques to market quicker, we can innovate quicker and we'll get ahead quicker as well.
So you might assume that one has a clear line of sight from when you leave a university, as I did UCD with my Bachelor of Engineering, through to my current role, which is the chair of UK, Middle East, India and Africa, responsible for 6,000 plus people. But there isn't a clear sight. And I think what you should expect is, as my green marks have suggested, many highs and lows in your career, times when you really develop and flourish and learn, and other times where it mightn't seem as exciting. But you can learn from all of those times. So I did not expect setting out from Dublin in 1980 to be where I am today, but I am where I am today. And I would say it's about being opportunistic. It's about taking the opportunities and learning from those opportunities as you go. But you don't just learn from your projects, you learn from all the things you do outside. So I've learned from my family life and my 3 children. I've also learned from doing projects in my community, from working with universities, from being school governors. That has given me a breadth of knowledge, which I apply every day to my job. But before I conclude, I want to say, I think it's, what did I get from my time at UCD? I think you get a very broad teaching, a broad set of skills, and many I did not appreciate the value of until I had finished and moved on in my career. You get classes with other disciplines, which I think are really important to develop multidiscipline thinking, multidiscipline understanding, because the future is going to be in integrated interdisciplinary work. I think you get a degree you can travel with, and that may be important in the current times. And I think the masters, although I personally did not do a master, I think it's really important as it enables you to step quickly and surely to chartership. And your career does depend fundamentally on you being a chartered engineer. I think the UCD Masters is great in that it does have work experience within the 2-year program, and therefore it connects you with businesses and enables you to find a job more readily afterwards with that employer or with another employer. So on that note, I should probably say thank you all for listening to me. And I hope that you will have successful and rewarding careers and look at a job like this and be as proud as I am of the work I've done. But it's not just me. Engineering is a real team game. So it's about collaboration and working with groups of people, which is the fun bit I really enjoy. So I'm going to hand back now at this stage to the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dervilla. That was excellent. Certainly great for people to see the kind of careers that they can have and the experience that you can gain over a period of time. And Katie, have there been any questions coming in?
Yes, we've had quite a few questions actually. So a couple relating directly to Dervilla. So I think as we've just finished with Dervilla, we'll go straight back to her. I have someone ask, can you single out any one project as a particular career highlight, or is that just too difficult to do?
I have to say that Terminal 5, which I finished with, has to be my career highlight, because I so personally vested 6 years of my life in taking that from concept through to completion. And as I walk into the terminal now, I can remember the day we sat around the table and created a particular connection. I can remember exactly how the dialogue went so that we did a single span. So everything about the design, particularly of the structure of Terminal 5A, I remember. And that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Those are close seconds. Portcullis House has to be the one I probably learnt most on because it was the most complex project, but because I wasn't there from beginning to end, I don't quite feel that it was mine. So Terminal 5, Heathrow.
Done. This is a question that maybe either Dervilla or Amanda might have a view on. One of our attendees is asking, do they think that companies are going to press pause on the hiring of new graduates, given that the current environment we find ourselves in?
Yeah. Dervilla, it might be good for you to respond on that. I think we'd spoken about that recently.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm very happy to respond on that. I mean, I think it is a very challenging time for young people to come into this profession. But I hope, first of all, you've seen from my talk that I survived, and one can survive recessions in Ireland, in London. And I think it's because engineering is fundamentally such an important career in terms of shaping our future. And I probably didn't say enough about the role of a civil engineer now in delivering sustainable development and a sustainable world for the future. So I think our skills are going to be in more demand, particularly then coming to Arup. We have decided to still recruit. We have been well on with our recruitment process, so we have completed our recruitment for next year, and we are going to still honour our offer to everybody who has a job with us. But we've asked them to defer their start from September to January because we felt uncomfortable about young people moving to a new city, moving in with new people at a time when we will probably still be partially out of our offices. So that has been well received. So I'm hoping all other employers are doing similar sort of things, maybe some deferral, but honouring all their offers of employment.
I think that will be reassuring for our attendees to hear. I don't know if you want to add to that, Amanda, or I have a couple of questions that are probably more appropriate for you as head of school to answer, if I can move on.
No problem, yeah.
So someone just asking, in terms of the dissertation element that they complete as part of their master's, I think either in the 2-year or the 1 year, they're wondering how much flexibility do they get in selecting their own topic, or are they all pre-assigned?
Yeah, interesting point. So we would make some topics available which might be of interest to people, but we also encourage people to come up with something that they have thought about themselves. The project generally comes after the internship, and what we do when students are on internship, oftentimes they'll come up with issues and problems that happen in a company, but there's not always time for companies to take time out to research. So sometimes something will come up where a student might want to carry that on into their project, and that is absolutely fine. I think the one thing is that the student has to be interested in the topic, and if it's a topic that they come up with themselves, they'll be particularly interested in it. I think that's important.
That's excellent, thank you. Also, we've had a couple of questions around the student experience, and I'm delighted to say actually we have one of our students, Kieran, who's going to join us now. And I think it might just be worthwhile having him give us an overview, maybe just for 5 minutes or a few minutes, of his experience at UCD. So Kieran is actually a graduate, a very recent graduate, I believe, of our 2-year masters in civil, structural and environmental engineering. So I think I might just mute us and ask Kieran to give us an overview of his experience at UCD.
So yeah, I did my master's. I'm just after finishing there in civil, structural and environmental. And I did my undergrad in UCD, so I went all the way through. Overall, it's a great program, and I'd encourage everyone to do it, especially if they have an interest in more of the design side to engineering and civil engineering. I really feel like it came into its own there, and you were able to focus to where your interests lay. So for me, that was primarily towards geotechnical engineering and soil mechanics. So I was able to choose my modules and my subjects based on my interest, and kind of keep a bit of variety where I wanted to, but mainly focus on them. And actually for my internship last year, I went to Arup in Dublin as part of the geotech team. And I'm actually going back as a grad. So it's a really good opportunity to get your foot in the door into a good firm or a good company if that's what you want, or maybe try something a little different. I was able to maybe talk to a few lecturers before I applied to different internships. And the great thing about it is, if you really like it, it's 8 months and you have 8 months of something you really enjoy. But if it's something you took maybe a bit of a chance on and it turns out you didn't enjoy it as much as you thought you would, it's still only 8 months and it's still only an internship. So it still gives you that flexibility. So I think it's a really good opportunity to get a bit of experience. And yeah, I really enjoyed my 2 years.
And what about your project, Kieran? Did you choose it yourself, or what way did you go about it?
Yeah, I suppose I was one of the lucky ones. I did an internship that I really enjoyed, and I came. There was a number of, as you mentioned, there was a number of topics or points of interest that really just, there wasn't the time in full-time employment to devote to the research. So I came back to UCD with a topic in hand about geotech in Dublin, and I was able to, I was in collaboration with Arup, so I was able to get data from them, from different ground investigations, and use that towards my project, which is really interesting. And hopefully going forward, since I'm going back, there might be, I think there's an opportunity to carry that on.
Excellent, very good.
So we have a couple more questions that have just come in, specifically for you, Kieran, actually. Someone was just interested to note that you've got a job in the same company that you did your internship in. They want to know, is that a common occurrence? I suppose, what would your experience be of your classmates in that regard?
To be honest, I would, yeah, it is pretty common to get an offer. Well, pre-COVID, I'm not sure how it's going to change after this, but certainly pre-COVID and last year, the industry was crying out for grads, and they really, there was a shortage, especially in some of the more specialized or niche teams or sectors such as geotech. So of the people that I know off the top of my head, I think everyone got an offer. Now, some people chose not to go back to the company they were in. They maybe wanted something a little bit different, or maybe they were open their eyes to a different sector, or maybe they wanted to move to a different city, etc. I don't know, but I think the rate of people who got an offer to stay on or come back was actually very, very high.
Okay, that's excellent. And just also another question relating to the internship. Somebody wondering, in terms of the supports that you got, was it easy to find an internship? Did the college or school or university support you in that regard?
Yeah, to be honest, it's as easy as it can be. It's a process that you really you have to take on yourself. It can't be handed to you, because you have to go through the process, do your own due diligence about applying to different companies and different roles. The university, UCD, they make it as easy as they can. There's a careers portal. All the internships are listed, that they're available, that the companies have already come to UCD and say, we want people, we want interns to apply. And for some companies, you apply directly through that portal. For Arup, you had to do it externally through the Arup website, and it was slightly different. But again, it's just the application process. Like, all the information was there in front of you, was given to you. And in terms of support, there's mandatory workshops that you have to go to. The Career Centre in UCD is really very, very good in terms of getting your CV and your cover letter up to spec. And I found those really invaluable. But the support is there particularly if you go after it and you start asking. The doors are there, but you have to knock on them for it to be opened. But there are some mandatory workshops that you do have to go to as well. So I would say the support is very good.
Excellent. I think it's also worth mentioning that we have 2 internship managers in the college, and I know they work very closely with companies to secure those listings that Kieran was mentioning that you see on the careers portal, and presenting those opportunities too. And congratulations on your job also, Kieran. Amanda, I have
Thank you very much.
Quite a specific question who's come in from an attendee, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, but they are mentioning that they have a BSc in irrigation and water engineering planning. And they're planning to take civil engineering as their master's degree. So what they're wondering is, do they need to start from the beginning or not? So I guess the question is there a possibility, if I'm reading that correctly, around recognition of prior learning, I think?
Yes, of course, there is recognition of prior learning. So we would need to know, I suppose, what content the student has taken, and I suppose where they want to go, what they want to take on. So if they're pursuing a master's in water engineering, for example, they may not need to start back at the beginning. They may need to, they may be able to progress straight into the master's program. But if they want to widen their program, widen their experience, perhaps to take on transportation or structural engineering, there may be modules that they may need to take as well. So it's dependent on what the background of each student is, if they're trying to change a little bit what their experience is and what modules they've already taken.
Brilliant. I think just to that student as well, the process is when you start with us, that's when you can make your application for recognition of prior learning. and your modules and your prior learning is assessed at that point. Actually, thank you, Laura, for joining us. Laura is our marketing manager in the College of Engineering and Architecture. And I have a question perhaps you might be able to answer. Someone asking, do they have to pay their fees in one go, or is there an option to stagger the fees?
Yeah, so there is the option to stagger the fees, and UCD has kind of certain dates set out throughout the year. So for students on a 3-trimester program, they have 3 installments they can pay it in. And for students on a 2-trimester program, you know, they can pay it in 2 installments per year. For international students, it might be a little bit different because some visa offices, particularly like the Indian visa office, request students to pay 50% of their fees. So I just get those students to make sure that they're checking with their visa process. But UCD itself, it can pay in installments. So the first one is in September, the second one is in January, and then the third one is towards the end of May, I think it is, that they have to pay the rest of their fees.
Excellent. Also, just Laura, while we have you there, someone is just asking, is there any clarification around, I suppose, the start date for this year and the way the teachings are going to occur given the current circumstances?
Yeah, so at this moment in time, obviously it's still a fluid situation, so these things can change, and I'd always advise students to make sure that they're looking at, we have an extensive FAQ page on our website that I'm sure we'll send a link to, but essentially what's happening at the moment is UCD is going to delay their start date by 2 weeks. So the orientation week will now take place from the week commencing the 14th of September, and then the teaching term will commence from the 21st of September. And then what the teaching term will actually look at is we're at the moment working towards trying to provide the best on-campus experience that we possibly can, while still maintaining, you know, within the government's public health guidelines. So what that will kind of mean for most students is larger groups, things like large lectures and things, will most likely take place still online, but that smaller groups such as labs and tutorials will hopefully, and we will work towards giving them an on-campus in-person experience for our students. And core modules, some elements will be on campus, and then some will have to be online learning. And we do recognise that some students may struggle to actually come to us in September, particularly if they're international students. So UCD is going to provide alternative online learning for those students until they can actually join us on campus as well.
Okay, thank you. I think it's the most important thing is that this situation is changing on a regular basis, and it's something that the university is currently working through. And as Laura mentions, we have very extensive FAQs available on our website. If you go to ucd.ie, you'll see it advertised on the front page. I think we just have a couple of final questions, and Amanda, I'll go back to you. Someone specifically interested in water, waste and environmental engineering, which we know is a 1-year master's. They're wondering, do the graduates mostly go on to work in the private or the public sector?
Well, there would be a mix, and the same for all of our graduates, that they would go on to work in various different sectors. So there could be private sector or public sector. So it really, you know, they could go into consulting, engineering, contracting, public agencies. They could even go back into research, further education. So there's a range of things that are of places that our graduates would go to. So very much depending on what their expertise is, what they want to do, and what is available, I suppose, at the time. So quite a range, and that will be the same across all of our programs as well.
Excellent. And I think that actually concludes all of our questions. Hang on, I think another one may have just come in. Sorry, Laura, you might be able to answer this question. Someone is asking about being an asylum seeker. How do you go about paying the fees?
For those students, my best advice is we do have an access office here in UCD. So it's ucd.e/ALL on our website, and they're the office that really looks after any students who are coming in from non-standard entry, particularly asylum seekers, and I know they have a fund available as well. So for those students, I'd recommend getting in touch with our access office, and they can give you all the advice necessary to be able to make your application, and also any funding that might be available for your fees as well.
Thank you very much. And I think that concludes our session today. I want to pay a particular thank you to Dr. Dervilla Mitchell, Professor Amanda Gibney, our student Kieran Simpson, who is obviously just starting his career path, and we'll be very interested to follow you, Kieran, and maybe you'll be back giving the keynote speech in a number of years. And also to Laura Egan O'Brien for helping us out as well. If you have any questions that have not been answered today, you can contact myself or Laura. Our email addresses are available on the website. I might just get Laura to pop them into the chat there for you, and you can take them down. I might give the final word to the head of school, Professor Amanda Gibney, just to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I'd like to thank Katie and Laura, particularly Katie, for organising this session. And I'd say if you do have any questions, please do feel free to contact us. My email is amanda.gibney@ucd.ie, so very easy to remember. So if you do have any particular questions about programmes, do feel free to make contact. I'd like to also echo what Katie has said and thank Dervilla Mitchell. Say thank you very much, Dervilla, for giving us a talk today. It was really very welcome. Thank you. And also to Kieran, thank you for taking the time to share your experience of your time in UCD. So thank you very much, everybody.